Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wayward Black Woman Podcast. And I'm your host, Alicia M. Gray, or AM Gray if you like. Today, I'd like to discuss Trump, classism, and the shaming of the poor in America. Now, I don't use the word poor very often. And classism is subjective when we're dealing with African American cultures because class is not necessarily associated with income. So when I say poor, especially when we're talking about a billionaire class, which is basically the top 5% who are now running this country, oligarchs, that poor class then becomes larger, and we must realize that. So now when we're talking about the poor, we're talking about the middle class. And this is to include the lower middle class as well, and the actual poor that are underneath the lower middle class. So we're all going to end up being encompassed within this whole debacle sort of situation where we are all going to become the next group of poor individuals. And I say that because America is the land of the working poor. I mentioned quite a while ago, about a week and a half ago, about other countries that were prosperous, which are considered, by everyone else in the world, to be the happiest countries on earth. These countries are primarily white. They receive all of the benefits that Trump is now denying us. They get them expectantly, they get them wholeheartedly, they get them without any type of drama or criticism. Norway, Finland, you name it. And the list goes down with the Nordic countries. The reason why they get this treatment, and I believe, honestly, is because of white privilege. So when you see things that are happening in America, and I was just mentioning a moment ago, Tim Wise and the invention, quote unquote, of the white race. We've all, especially people like me who has a bachelor's in sociology, have heard of Tim Wise. Tim Wise, a white sociologist who repeatedly tells people that white societies have demonized black cultures, in particular the African American culture, and have really recreated themselves as being the heads of our society. So when we see things that are going on with Trump, and Trump is at this point considered to be, I don't know if the word is winning, because I don't consider this to be a game, not by a long shot. But when we see things happening where it's basically just a psychology game, and we're not picking up on it as a society. Now, some people are just naive, some people are not educated, and some people are just hoping for the best. Several years ago, there was a book called Under the Affluence, Shaming the Poor, Praising the Rich, and Sacrificing the Future of America, which was written by Tim Wise. And he's had several, but that one hit this right on the money, almost like he knew it was coming. That hit it, verbatim as to what's going on right now under Trump and his whole entire administration. What they're doing is bold. And again, you can think it's simplistic, but it is cognitive dissonance, right? Where we needed to have something done. There was a conflict. We had a serious problem with corruption, and we still do, from both the Democrats and the Republicans. No matter what they tell you, they're both the same. They're both corrupt. People stealing the money of the American people. And, this includes mass migration I'm not against immigration, or I'm not against legal immigration, but the illegal immigration and the fleecing of the funds, that came from the Democratic Party was ridiculous. And this is coming from African American people who couldn't even get reparations, but, billions were going out of the door for illegal immigration. That is admittedly probably the worst that I've ever seen happen in this country. And not to mention the crime-ridden neighborhoods that began to develop. And I don't know how many of you are my age, but I remember years ago when the gangs first started, and that's how they started. When people are liberal enough with your life to think that you are expendable, then that's when it's time to make a change. Now the problem, and I've said this from the beginning, with Trump is his change involved violence. And even though he has learned to hide that violence, right? And white male masculinity does this, usually not so well, because you really have to know how to play the game. White male privilege now hides behind other things in America, because I don't care how simple-minded you are, you know that it's politically incorrect to be misogynist, to be racist, and to be an out-and-out bigot. So over the years, we've learned to internalize these things. Now, or I should say they have. In other countries, for instance, they are not as withholding of their emotions. They will go out and just be, misogynist. They might beat women in certain countries, and I'm not joking either. It's not funny. I'm talking about in public, and think that it's their privilege to have Mr. this and Mr. that versus having a woman own something, right? And as our societies all around the world start to wake up, we are getting there. But there's a lot of places where they still expect for men to have the last word. So if it seems far-fetched what Trump is doing, it's not, because he knows this, that even though America's probably one of the most liberal societies in the world, we still had a lot of work to do. And there's still very many countries, you guys know about Asia, where I visited, where many men are just still stuck in the dark ages. It's shocking, the amount of sexism here, misogyny, and the expectation that women should act certain ways and put up with chastisement, sexual harassment, you name it, And it's just shocking. And some places it's very modern. I'm not saying all of Asia. Obviously, I haven't visited all of Asia, but, it is a learning experience, I think, for everyone. The racism against people who are your same skin color, the internalized oppression, or, the whitening of your skin. And I believe, again, it's because of the UV rays. They mean to say brightening, but most of the products are going to say whitening. Perhaps there's a misnomer and they mean the same thing. Perhaps. But judging by some countries, not really. Like you go and you see the skin is literally, they'll show you a photo of a pink skinned person and then or I'd say a beige skinned person and a very, very white person, And it is still offensive, right? So, lost in translation. Same with men. We're sort of slipping backwards in society, and it's not getting any better because we're not talking about it. As for these civil rights violations with Trump, all of this is within this game of going backwards, of pushing the clock backwards, and to push the executive office authority to the point where we know that this is illegal. There's nothing but illegality in, 95% of what he's doing. The 5% is what I mentioned before, illegal immigration and catching fraud, sure. But one thing about not being able to control the person who's behind the 8 ball. This person can just go full throttle if you give them a little, and we've learned this about white supremacy in the past. I don't know if many of you grew up in the South like I did. If you give them a little, they'll take a whole lot. So you have to be very, very careful Now, normally the check for, being careful is you make sure you do your job, such as in the Democratic Party. You don't ever get too liberal, and you always check for if they're trying to get over on you, right? My example was years ago, we used to have a bunch of white supremacists riding around in big monster trucks with big tires, and they'd look over other cars and pretend like they were going to run them over, especially if they saw a person of color. And, they'd yell out racial slurs out of the windows and stuff, right? And they passed laws. This is how it happened in my area, because I grew up in Virginia, which said they were illegal, the tires. They didn't address the racism directly, which I still disagree with, but they made the tires illegal. So they said the suspension was a problem. They couldn't do the whole truck thing anymore. So a lot of these dudes just disappeared. I can't be a bigot anymore. I'm leaving. What are you guys saying? We also had some other civil rights violations that happened. We had a riot back in the 90s, right around the time of the LA riots. The Greeks came down, the black Greeks. We used to have Greek Fest, and, we'd have hundreds of thousands of, because it's a big, I guess, not a party area, but it's an area for summer vacation and stuff. And a lot of black people come down. And, it was too much for the white people who wanted to be in charge, right? It was like Trump back in the 80s. Everything was white. Make America white again. It was literally ridiculous to have black people spend their money in a society that didn't respect them. So in turn, there was a riot. They wouldn't let them stay at the hotels in Virginia Beach, and it was just nonsense. Now, this was also a time where we had a kind of renewal of the Black is Beautiful type of aesthetic from the 70s, and people were really feeling themselves. A Different World, The Cosby Show, Martin. You can imagine all those things were on television, in living color with the Wayans brothers. And even though some of this stuff is dated, we had representation of some type, and a great deal of representation. I think Arsenio Hall, it was either before or after that. There was a lot. Eddie Murphy was out in the movies, but yet we couldn't necessarily go to certain places because they still did not technically like African American people, especially not a lot of them. We were still threatened when we went certain places, and we were threatening to the people who worked in those establishments. They were still calling the cops on black people and stuff. And, you will find places in the South, sadly now, especially North Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, whatever, that still do that. And this is what I'm afraid of with Trump, that will return along with that aesthetic of, oh, I'm just a bigot, and you're just going to have to get over it. This is my class level because I'm white, and I'm automatically privileged over you. There's a lot of things that happened during that time, and you have to remember, and this is what I tell the younger generation, so that it will never happen again. The first thing they did was look at your records without your permission to try to figure out, because if I can look at everything about you, how much money you have, your credit score and all of that, I can go and call the cops on you and say, well, she's probably stealing. I can see right now she's only got $30 in a bank. Why is she shopping in this high-end store? Or, she's receiving benefits for something. She shouldn't be in here, and call the cops on her. And yes, a lot of white people used to do it. Sometimes if African American people had low self-esteem, if they internalized racism, they did it too. And I think that when they blocked the records so that no one could get in except for people who were qualified to get in, and law enforcement in particular needed a warrant, it made it so that people who were educated did not participate in this behavior, because they also were going to get fined, get fired, or go to jail. Now, with this new Elon Musk situation, it also might save your life too. And this is something I'm not negating, especially during a black femicide that we're having in the U.S. It'll save your life if someone that is in law enforcement, or you used to date, or whatever, or both, has access to your address and has access to your financial information and who you're dating, if you're remarried, so forth and so on. That's extremely dangerous, and that's the reason why we have a court system, so that people cannot go into your records and find you and stalk you and make your life a living hell. So that's one of the things that bothered me about the whole situation of invading this privacy of all Americans in order to help save us, which is a crock of crap, right? It's a crock of BS. We all know that. We can all see that violating our First Amendment rights is ridiculous. We all have a right to privacy. And we're missing the point here within this classism that is really in itself ridiculous when you're dealing with billionaires claiming to save you money by using you to do it. It doesn't make any sense. I'm going to save you money by taking away all of your benefits. And if you don't receive those benefits, I'm going to take them away from the people who do and claim that I'm going to give you money back. But at the same time, I might be, digging a little bit of, my hand into that pile myself, because why not give myself something? If I'm doing all this work, I deserve to get paid. It's hard work ripping you off. It doesn't make any sense. It's an actual con. And I think we need to realize that when you don't do your job, and people are saying this about the whole, boycott thing of corporations and being objectified, we need the Democrats to do their job. And Trump, we're the Democrats. Yeah, you've noticed the mild-mannered way that they are addressing the Democrats. There are a few who are standing up and trying their best, but they're just a lonely 2 or 3 people. They're getting voted out left and right as far as these budget bills. They're getting bullied. And yes, I know Trump just bullied that one young lady into going along with this budget, and she was from Russia or somewhere. I'm not sure where she's from, that congresswoman, and she was basically bullied into voting for Trump. I can see what's going on. She was like, I don't see the point, just like I am saying to you right now, of participating in stealing from the American public and claiming you're going to give them that money back. We just wanted you to be straight and narrow. We wanted you, yes, to do some of this stuff, but we wanted you to do it legally, as a president should. If you can do anything illegally that you want, then that means you have free reign. No one in this country should have free reign over the American public. And that's when you know it's out of control again. That's when you know that white woman is going to be looking out of her window, lying her behind off just because she can. And if you think that's not going to happen to you, just think again. Just because you didn't grow up in the South or you've never seen it before, I've seen it multiple times. They are completely arrogant and out of their minds. They will make up the most outrageous lies right to the faces of whoever they're talking to and smirk, knowing they're lying. Now, it depends on if that other white supremacist person wants to believe it. You'd be surprised at how many people have low self-esteem and go along with it. And that includes law enforcement, especially if they've got beef and you're a black woman. Everything about us is always threatening. I'm just saying, it's going to trickle down. Everyone knows it's trickling down, and everyone's just hoping to avoid those toxic raindrops, because nobody wants acid rain and nobody wants rain that burns your damn skin completely off, because that's what's happening. Run this way, run that way. And how is this going to affect us? I honestly, I have no problem with people understanding there is no right or left. There's just right and wrong. Period. There's no Democrat, there's no Republican, there's right and there's wrong. There's racism, there's sexism. I don't care what Trump tries to tell you. I don't, mind telling you those degrees were very expensive that I got, but it doesn't really take one to understand if a white supremacist looks at you and says there's no racism, that we're back in 1950, whatever. I don't even know if that's 1950. That's probably 1918. And even then they knew there was racism. We cannot afford, in the African American community in particular, to go backwards. We cannot afford to have a faux or false class war with people who aren't looking out even for your best. I don't even know how to say it. They aren't looking out for you at all. All they're looking out for is themselves and saying, trust me, I got you. Trust me, I got you. Now, suppose he does find this fraud and give back a few $1,000s. A few $1,000s won't even pay for a few months of rent for some people. And that's another thing. The rent costs are through the roof. Gas prices are high. Food prices are high. And we're talking about none of this. While all of this stuff goes on, we're still going back and forth. And yes, he's trying his best with fake diplomacy. Zelensky today, he basically, went off on, which is kind of outrageous. I think that, again, there's right and wrong. We knew that $80 billion or whatever Ukraine was supposedly had gotten from us disappeared. We know there was fraud in there. We know that there's fraud with USAID, but we also know they're starving people. So this is what I'm talking about with cognitive dissonance. If you have people starving in Africa, people starving in Palestine, that were getting food legitimately, which I agree with absolutely 100%. Everyone knows I'm an activist, for the poor, for African American people, for African American women. People know that. People know that I will most of the time stick my neck out for folks if they're doing the right thing, and definitely for those who are impoverished, because I don't play that. But if there's fraud, you need to handle it correctly. You can't cut off everyone. That's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So now there are people starving. There's billions of dollars missing. And yes, I do blame the Democrats. Hell yeah, I blame them. They knew white liberalism was racist. And this is what I've said from the beginning. Good Christian fellowship from A Raisin in the Sun, the same example. You can't move into this neighborhood with us good white folk now because we both go to the same church. Or, I'm sorry, you can't go to my church because it's a white one, but we both Christians. And that means white privilege, and you're wrong for trying to move into a white neighborhood being black folk. Now, come on. This is the same thing the Democrats consistently preach to us. Now, you can't say anything about these migrants being here, and no, we didn't give you anything. Because you've been here long enough, black folk. So who cares if you had slavery? Who cares about all your problems? You don't need reparations. That's ridiculous. This is what they told us over and over and over again. And every legal challenge, and they're still in court trying to get reparations. It is absurd that they would even remotely consider that level of immigration, knowing they were still doing wrong by the black community. It is absurd. It's irrational, it's immature, it's not thought out, it's absolutely taking advantage and exploiting the African American community, which they've been doing over and over and over again. So for them to have even gone there, they were doing it deliberately. I don't believe that they did not want this backlash to happen, and that's why they're so mild-mannered now. Because nobody in their right mind is going to go and tease something to happen, and when it does happen, pretend like they don't understand what's happening. No one. They wanted the backlash. See, and that we can play this seesaw game back and forth all day long. We can put them in the office right after Trump, or try to get him out of office, because I think they're going to try to impeach him for a third time. I really do, because I don't know how much of this people are going to take. Then you're going to yo-yo back to too much immigration and way too liberal nonsense, which got us in this situation. When are you going to get someone in office who actually thinks with sensibility, a real candidate not put into office by people with money, because this is about money, power, and classism. It isn't about what you think. These people think you're pawns. They just yo-yo you back and forth. And they use you until there's nothing left. They're just playing you for fools. You need someone who represents your own interests And I'm really waiting for these, you think it's just federal workers, I'm waiting for these riots to really ramp up. When it starts to trickle down, and nobody wants to feel that crap. Maybe then he'll come in with this few $1,000s or whatever, like, yay. Hey, we could all use a few $1,000s. I'm not like Jasmine Crockett. I will tell you, I need a few $1,000s as many people do. Anybody could use some extra money, especially when they have bills to pay. I'm a single mom with 2 kids. I'm never going to tell you, okay, I can't put this money in the bank. I'm never going to be that liberal. And that's another thing that these Democrats do. But I will tell you that that's not enough. You think that if you cut Medicaid or benefits such as that, sorry, let me turn this down. If you cut food stamps, if you cut all types of things that people need to live, to eat, to breathe, literally to breathe, because people need medical care, that, a few $1,000s is going to help them. They need a place to live. People are living in their cars as they've been living in their cars. And this is not because people are bad people. It's because rent is, $2,000 for 1 bedroom in a very low income area. It's like, where are people going to get this money making $8.50 per hour minimum wage? It's absurd. And if you're lucky, you're in an area where they make $13, that's still not enough for $2,000 a month. I mean, you got to eat. You got to have gas in your car if you have one. It's just time, I think, for people to start standing up for themselves. Now, Trump says he's standing up for you, and he's right. They did steal. Ukraine stole billions of dollars. He doesn't know what happened to the money. Now, it could be that he doesn't really know. But again, you're running into the same problem. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what happened to, supposedly, to the USAID money. Nobody knows what happened to supposedly the money that goes to Ukraine. Nobody knows, what's going on with the migrant situation. They took billions. And, the more you're taken advantage of and the more leeway you give to Trump, the more you're going to keep getting taken advantage of. You should have been talking to the Democrats about this years ago. And that's really the bottom line. You want people to stand up for you that are legitimate. You don't want more people to rip you off. I don't think, not for one moment, that these people won't try to take it back to 1985, back to Reagan whenever possible. I've said that before. You don't want those rednecks. You don't want those racist people. People keep saying, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, cancel food stamps. Yeah, they don't need that. They don't need that stuff. What did I just tell you about the happiest countries in the world and how they're praised because they're white? What did I just tell you that? Because they're 90% plus white. You are making fools of yourselves. This is reverse psychology. You will be happy and own nothing. You're not going to own anything. And you're going to be fighting over morsels, and everything that you get, you're going to feel guilty about. And I've seen this before. You're going to be working like slaves. And I do mean that literally, because black folk, you are going back to slavery, whether you realize it or not. But you're just now bringing in some lower class white folk and other folk with you. They were talking about someone, I don't know, said that they've canceled already school lunch. I'm not sure. Yeah, my son just turned 18, so thank goodness I don't have to deal with that anymore. But I will tell you, it infuriated me, because he's a pull yourself up by the bootstraps type of person. We love that in the black community, right? And I was working when I was a kid at 7, and what? Why do they need school lunch? Okay, this is nonsense. And this is the type of racism and nonsense that you're going to get when you're dealing with people who push it to the extreme. We all know that sometimes in lower income communities, lunch is the only meal that these kids get at school, which is why it's the most important meal of the day, and it's so important to have it in public schools funded correctly. We know this. Everyone does. And if those schools are lucky, they also get funding for breakfast, which helps those kids when they get to school start off the day well. They get a good lunch, and the parents, they know they're, safe until they get home. In most situations, they're safe. They get home, and then they fix them dinner, and that's less of a burden for them financially, and their kids most of the time eat healthy, aside from like the slimy pizzas and Chick-fil-A that they started giving kids for lunch. And perhaps that's what's bloating the budget. Now, like I say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Perhaps you need to review the menus and make sure that you're not spending too much on school lunches. Not, there is no school lunch. Or I'm going to start giving poverty boxes to people who receive benefits, because I think people that receive food stamps are stupid and can't make their own decisions. And I'm here to tell you that's not the case, because I know many educated people. Some people out here working 2 jobs, and they have to get food stamps, especially if they have children, because they can't make their money stretch. Because what did I just tell you? Rent is too damn high. Mortgages are going up because of the inflation crisis. So don't just think it's people that rent either. It's ridiculous. And when people stand up, you get these shills, these people who are coons, I will use that word, yes I will, in the black community, who will not admit to the truth. Oh, that's not me. Oh no, but I think they need to get rid of those food stamps and stop depending on the government. You're fools. That is the actual job of the government. It's not the entire job, but it's definitely a large part of their job to protect the people and keep the people happy. You should not have to work like a slave in a country like America, where you can go to another country and clearly see they give their people way more than what we get for way less hassle. I've been to several countries in Asia, and yes, they aren't the richest in every area, but I tell you what, if their food wasn't affordable, I'm sure the government would hear about it. If they didn't have, the best resources all the time, and they most definitely don't, they still have, as far as housing, more than what we do by far. Prices are way more affordable, and the food is more affordable on the most, for the most part, because they have to import stuff. They have their issues. I am not saying it's perfect, not by any means. I had complained numerous times about the lack of hair care products and, the lack of education in some areas. Things, are gonna, be a little different in other areas, and they're gonna be lacking in some areas. But they're not America. They don't have billions of dollars coming in that are supposed to be going towards places that money's not going. And that's the problem. Where is the money going? And you're going to tell me people who think that any type of cultural education or awareness is woke, quote unquote. What the hell is woke? We're still doing this. We're letting them redefine through their understanding what started in our culture. Now, once they have that measure of control, you lost everything. This is what you don't understand. You control the conversation. If woke meant something new for you to gain knowledge of and to learn something and to, creatively put that into your cultural narrative, that's where it should stay. It should not go into transgenderism only when it's convenient, and anything that involves black people when it's convenient even more. That's not what it means. It meant that you woke up and you learned something about your culture. Redefine for yourselves what started with you. You don't let somebody else call you a different name than your name. Like, for instance, I used to have someone ask me, my name is Alicia, obviously, and they'd be like, oh, do they call you Allie? I'm like, what? No. Why would you ask me something silly like that? Like, I've never even heard someone ask me, do they call me Allie? And why would you just ask me specifically that? Yes, I do have other nicknames. Over the years when I was younger, I had many. That was not one of them. So, if she had just periodically called me Allie, oh, can I call you Allie? No. No, you cannot call me Allie. That is not my nickname. And this is what you need to understand about the mind game that's being played on you. Someone told you your name was something else. And not only was your name something else, I'm going to reattach it, commodify your responses being in agreement, because I'm not even going to ask you what your opinion is. I'm just going to say, this is what you think too. I'm not going to give you a chance to respond. And then I'm going to reshape that into a new narrative. So now woke means what I said it meant. And I'm going to not only say it means this, but then I'm going to internalize it and project that back onto you. Because I don't like certain things about what I consider to be woke. They had to include the Black community. This is what you need to understand. This is basically about the gay community, transgenderism, their hatred of women as pseudo hypermasculine men. That's arguable. I mean, I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into any of the tropes I've seen. I'm not into that. Trump in a diaper, Trump dressed as a woman, cross-dressing and dating these different world leaders. I don't do that, right? Because if they did do that, or if there were any problems with his bowel movements, I'm definitely not one to talk. I have lupus. I've never been that one anyway. If you wanted to date, cross-dress, do whatever you want, I believe people have the right, as long as they are not causing harm, to do whatever they want. But their behavior does speak, that hypermasculinity does sound like they're hiding something. And we all know that. We know the old trope. So I'm not going to go. And that goes for Vance and anybody else in our cabinet. And this is well known. I mean, since we're talking Napoleon about this complex where they want to overcompensate, and that is an older word, but it's the truth, for other things, if you know what I mean. And my name is not Whitney Williams. I'm saying that to be sarcastic. I guarantee you I am in full use of my entire brain, no matter how tired I am as a single mom, a kid with autism, and lupus. I'm still here. And I still have an opinion. I'm going to keep talking. You can shadow ban me. You can pretend like you don't hear me, but I know you do. You can keep lying and, stupid stuff, calling the cops, making up things. Do what you want. I'm still going to be the same activist. I'm still going to be that same bee. And you can call me that if you want, but you know what? That's what it is. And that's what it's always going to be. I'm never going to be the one to let people disrespect me. So, in the end, we can see this is a false class war. Back to what I was saying before. Don't buy it. I hate to see African American people jump into a class war like they really believe that this is not going to end up with them being the target. Foolish. Don't do that. You're always the target. Black women, especially, you're the most vulnerable, not only because of the black femicide, but because you're always the target. You have the children. Any type of race cannot succeed without the woman actually giving birth. And if you think the birth rate's not declining in the black community, you're wrong. It has been slowly and steadily declining over the years. I just want to make it clear to you. You have to think of the overall narrative, and then in the end, think of the issues that specifically affect you first. Always put your perspective into any situation, even if you're just thinking, well, what about me? I'm not saying be petty. I'm saying use common sense. When we're dealing with people that will objectify African American people when it's convenient, they're right. The black women are right for staying out of this crap. I don't know about the meme of seeing people burning their, the house is burning down and black women drinking coffee and watching. We're not that apathetic or that mean. But we are staying out of it because we've tried, and I know I've been that one too, so I don't want to say I told you so. For years, I told you years ago this was going to happen. Years. And some people don't have that type of mentality where they can understand all of this, and I get it. But use common sense. If something doesn't sound right and you know that it looks like something's about to happen, and sometimes you don't have a choice but to keep your mouth shut. We're all busy. You know, I have a lot on my plate too. I always do. Very little family. You know, I got to stay on my budget. And I'm trying to, deal with harassment as an activist. At the same time, it's a lot. But understand, when you're dealing with reality and not just stereotype threats, stop internalizing all of that. When they tell you they're going to cut benefits, one way or the other, whether you get them or not, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect you, just like those federal workers. I don't believe everyone deserves to lose their job like that. People have families. Now you're going to have to tell me how these people are not going to go into the regular job market and start pushing other people out because they don't have a choice. So now he's basically created a situation where there is competition. Whenever people put rats in a maze and force them to compete, they're up to something. You're rats in that maze right now. But what you could all do is stand up for yourselves and say, I want real change. I want someone to do something about, helping us. And not just a $3,000 or $5,000 check, even if you get it. I mean, there's silly people up here they're all excited on their vlogs. We're going to get this money, but it might be a stipulation that only certain people of certain income get this money. And it's just like, you can hear their voices trailing off before they even finish the sentence. What? So the people that need the money aren't going to get the money. The people that don't need the money, if he does give anything back from this, silliness, supposedly exposing fraud and waste, he's not going to give it to the people that need it. And that definitely right now includes all the people he just fired. I just need you to use common sense. There are some federal workers, and a lot of them that are African American. We all know, as I said before, they told them go get that good government job. Government not gonna let you down. Just like your government name. Just go and give them your government name and go about your business, right? Wrong. Anarchy. That's what's going on right now. I can't talk. And we need to start realizing that within our own lives, what did I tell you about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Again, for those of you guys who have a background in psych or soc, I have both. But when you're at the very bottom, that's what people want that are trying to take advantage of you. They want you to always look like you're scared. You're at the lowest level, that you'll do anything to get just the basic needs. So we never really get to the top because we're always being pushed back down to the bottom. So the closer you can get to what you actually are and not just what people try to make you be at the lowest level, the better you're going to feel. So if you're just out here saying that you'll, get back at anybody, I mean, we're going to be fighting in the streets, backstabbing one another, this is what they want. I think if you stay steady and understand that this is not a real class war, you're not a billionaire, not most of you. This is an oligarchy that is forming, and not only that, but a very dangerous one. I don't know about Nazi salutes. I don't know if they really are wannabe Nazis. I don't know what's going on. But I know if you aren't anything but an afterthought, you're being very arrogant to think that it won't happen to you. So before you say something about it happened to someone else, or laugh, or, I never thought the leopard would eat my face, right? The meme that's going around. I get it. But, it could happen to you too, unknowingly, right? Many people can say that about people that supported these white liberals in the Democratic Party and all the shills and so forth and so on. So before you talk about someone else, think about it could happen to you. And you may not have done anything to deserve it. I've had many things in my life happen that I didn't deserve. Many attacks, and by many cowards. So don't think that someone might not attack you in that same fashion. So I want to thank you guys for helping me get through this podcast. I'm trying to find time to make sure I get these podcasts done and to keep them steady and moving. I know I'm shadow banned, but I wanted you to understand, when I have an opinion, I have something to say, I will not be ignored. I will not back down. I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing. I do it because it's the right thing to do. Now, not saying that, I'm the nicest person. I never want to get paid for my work. I am a teacher, and teachers do get paid very little. You know what I'm saying? So it's something where people need to start understanding there's a difference between being nice and being too nice. And I had to learn that myself because I assumed in the African American community especially that people would understand what I'm trying to do, because why wouldn't I be this type of person being who I've been all my life? But what I was not anticipating was the jealousy and the backstabbing, the immaturity. So it was shocking to me, and it still is. But that's not going to change who I am. I'm just going to keep going. And I think that if I can help at least one person understand that they are not alone, if they are afraid to speak up, if they feel like something's not right in their lives, say, someone tries to make them think they can't do everything with prices going up, they can't feed their kids, they can't pay the rent, they can't, they're tired of working two jobs, I should say, they can't really work enough. That's not just you. Everyone's going through this. And it's not right. It's because the way capitalism controls our country. And yes, I agree with them with the boycott, but I don't think that was enough. And I don't necessarily think that people respect you, which is what they put on Instagram the other day, just because of economic power anymore. Like when we were kids, and I say this over and over again, I remember when my mom told the grocery store people, or told me about them, AMP, I think they used to be called or something, they put them out because they were racist. And they had that much power with the city that they could go down there and protest and say, we want these racist people out. It wasn't enough to say, and we've done this too, we're not going to shop there. We do that all the time in the Black community. It was, I want you to remove these people from this neighborhood now. They are racist in this store, and we're not going to tolerate it. And this is what you need to do as Black people. And I don't see you banding together. I see a lot of confusion. I see a lot of, I don't support single mothers. I don't support food stamps. I don't support, be quiet. Be quiet. It's not about that. It's about someone invading your right to privacy and deciding what's best for you because white male privilege says that it's the best thing for society. Ask yourself why this white male privilege doesn't extend to that white Nordic area where they get these things, extended benefits, without asking. Free childcare, days off from work whenever they want. Well, not whenever, but for the most part, a lot of days off from work. They get welfare benefits as expected. Why does no one patronize them, criticize them, and why are they considered some of the happiest places on earth? Why? I just want people to understand you're making a fool of yourself. Because the people that you're actually hating right now are, those people are yourselves. You're doing nothing but hurting yourself. So find your happy place and sit down and think about it. Don't demonize others. Look closely into yourself and find yourself and ask yourself, is this right? What's going on here? How can I make this right without being a white liberal and without Black women being exploited again? I know, because I'm one of them, and I said I'm going to stay out of it. But it's hard to stay out of it when you see other Black people who really believe they can pray and make it go away. I'm going to pray it away, I guess, and leave it alone and let somebody else handle it. That's not going to work. So we need to find a solution that does work. They're trying to save HBCU funding now. They're trying to save any type of funding for the black community. You're playing checkers and Trump is playing chess. He tells you there's no DEI, quote unquote, but then goes to a Black History celebration. So people are confused, and rightly so. There is cognitive dissonance. But that's because, again, you're letting someone else control your narrative. You need to ask diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is that just the program strong? It's like one question, and no one has ever asked. What do you mean, Trump, by diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is it just the programs that were implemented into workplaces? Or is it something else? Be specific. Now, actually, that might be 3 sentences, but you get my drift. This is how people used you. They changed the definition, or they're vague with their definition, and then you just go along with it. See how that assumed commodification of what they said because they're the so-called authority figure, the white privilege authority figures, because I said it's this now, and irregardless if you have years of text that tell you it's not that. Remember CRT? Everything was CRT. This is CRT. This is critical race theory. No, it isn't. Now, apparently they got called out on that. So they stopped using critical race theory because critical race theory is an actual academic text, and that is not, to be thrown around randomly. I hope they got sued. I don't know what happened with that, but they got bored with that. Or they got caught. So then they come up with, it's DEI. That's what it is. They're just using code words for anything that contains the black culture. And then they'll throw in something to try to legitimize it, like transgenderism. I'm like, what? It's woke. It's DEI. It's transgenderism. Okay. These are things that are absolutely ridiculous, and I'd say 8 times out of 10 are unrelated. You could have a black person who's a transgender, individual who happens to read or talk about critical race theory. I'm not saying that won't ever happen. That could happen. But rarely are we talking about the same thing. They're conflating all 3, and all of them are, in the end, going to mean black folk. So you need to be smart enough as a community to say, we rebuke that. We want you to define it specifically so that we can confront you on it. And it's the same way with this economic so-called purge. What are you purging? What are you doing with the Social Security numbers of American citizens? How is this going to affect our class if you're already billionaires and the middle class is slowly losing its money and its footing because they can't afford the current prices? No one has confronted him about the actual problem that we're having now with inflation, which is so bad people can't afford to actually live their lives. If he's been in office, similarly to the Nazis, if you guys know the story, the Nazis in 45 days or something, when they first came out, tried to implement everything quickly, just as Trump is doing, just so they could go ahead and get over before people realized what they were doing. This is why, again, it's so dangerous in relation to fascism. You need to confront him now and figure out what's going on and ask for specificity. Because if you don't, you're going to regret it later. Irregardless if they try to impeach him again or what happens, or if the courts, with the 20 million lawsuits he's got, you want change. You don't want stupidity. You don't want recklessness. You don't want people behind the 8 ball. You want people who help you. What have you done for me lately, in the words of Janet Jackson? You know what I'm saying? You want to know what he's going to do for you, and you want to know now. I don't think, because what I just said was like a paragraph of things that are specific that would change the whole dynamic of any of this conversation. And I haven't heard anyone ask these questions. And it's foolish, because you're letting someone lead you around by the nose and telling you everything they say is going to be the last word, and you're not doing anything about it. Now, I know there's some educated black folk. There's a lot, because educated black people taught me. And they're quiet as a mouse. Now, I know people might be afraid of the mob-like mentality of Trump, mafia type thing. I get it. But at the same time, there's reality. If you're screwed, you're screwed. So if you speak up, how is that going to make you any better or any worse? Ask a question. You have a right to ask questions. Make sure they understand. This is another thing with the Marjorie Taylor Greene and the say her name about the immigrant who killed the woman and all of that. Say her name. Say something. Excuse me, big butch body, whatever, blonde, whatever the crap her moniker is. That was used for black women. There's a Say Her Name campaign, and we would appreciate it if you wouldn't objectify black women by using that. I said something. Say something. And many of you may not know that there's a Say Her Name campaign. Sorry about that. It's still a Say Her Name campaign. It was black women killed via police violence. Now you see how that can be hijacked and commodified as being something for the woman who, I feel for the woman who got killed by the immigrant. I do. The illegal migrant. But go somewhere else with that. So you see what I'm saying? It's easy, and this happened during the women's movement with, black feminism. They objectified us, and that's why they aren't together anymore. Everything broke apart. Because if you continue to ignore things, they'll just keep going and going like they don't see you. They'll walk all over you. And you're like, hey, hey, hey. And that's what's happening to you now. Not only in black communities, but the entire, banana republic that the American society is becoming. It's not just how we look, it's how we're beginning to slowly wake up. But there's still a lot of people who are out here waiting, he might give us money. Yeah, I would hope he would give us money, because you know what? Biden should have given us money. There was the COVID thing and there was some stimulus, but a lot of states didn't give people money. So a lot of people never got any of that stimulus money. Maybe that first check, but that was it. $300 a month or something for 3 months. You know how hard that was to get? And I agree that if you had billions going out of the door, there's fraud. I'm not in any way denying that. But this might not be the way to handle it. This is a dangerous road we're on, and this is a way that I think black women are going to get tired of holding everybody else up. And it's not fair to anyone. The only way we can actually resolve it, though, is for all of us to understand we need to have common ground. If you're going to have a bigot type of mentality in any situation, whether it be benefits, whether it be classism, oh, I'm higher class, or I think I am, I think you're going to get a wake-up call. I really do. Because this is about racism. There's no other way it can go down in the end. I've seen it before, multiple times growing up. If someone is a bigot, trust me, and you agree with that person, yes, a leopard will eat your face. It will come back on you. And you're going to be that next victim. I've seen it 1,000,000 times. So just be careful. Now, you think you're the good, upstanding Christian, patriarchal family, so forth, so on, and I believe this and that. Everybody should be married. Nobody should get benefits. They deserve it. They need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and just work harder. Now, listen to that white person that just said something racist besides you say the same thing. This is what happened growing up. And then that person that said that was an African-American community or other community, looked and then said, that's not me, but it is you. It is. So all I can say is use common sense, stick to the issues, don't be swayed, and don't ever go into bigoted or racial content. It will lead you astray every single time, and it will do nothing but hurt you. Even if you think it doesn't affect you, it does. So anyway, my name is Alicia M. Gray, and thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I greatly appreciate it. I will talk to you guys again on next week. I hope you have a great rest of your day, And I'm out. Bye.